Ready?
Yeah, we're just going to come straight off the ramp, and I'm going to rotate to your right.
Okay.
And we'll just back it straight on up the ramp.
Got it.
The little lip right there, do you see it?
Got it.
Okay. All right, why don't you swing your end to the left, and I'll do the same here.
Okay.
How are we doing on room back there?
I think we got it.
That's it?
Yeah, great.
Welcome. Today, John and I will be showing you the steps for assembling the rack-mountable ProLiant server.
Now, we've already unpacked the 42U and placed it here near its final location.
Well, that's because you can't move a fully loaded rack any distance. Besides the sheer weight of it, which can top 800 pounds, movement may cause damage to the rack and rails.
Now, that's a good point. But you can ship the empty racks and components separately, right?
Right. It's easily moved into place because all Compaq racks come standard with casters. Now, we've already shipped another rack, the 22U, to its remote location.
And we'll install its components after we finished our installation here.
Why don't we take a look at this rack?
Okay.
Each rack is an industry standard 19-inch rack that's 24 inches wide and 34 inches deep.
They're shipped with the doors installed. The side panels are optional on the 42U, standard on the 22U.
Also located in the packing material are 100 fixing screws and cage nuts, along with 8 pairs of mounting brackets.
The 22U comes with 4 pairs of mounting brackets. It also comes standard with stabilizing feet, which are optional on the 42U.
So tell us, John, what does the U stand for?
Well, in the world of racks, a U is a unit of measurement that equals 1.75 inches.
Very good. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the components we'll be installing.
Okay. Wow, look at all this stuff. How will we know where everything goes once we begin installation?
I'm glad you asked. This report, which was generated by the Compaq Rack Builder software, shows everything we will be adding and where it goes. Now, this software is included with every server. You see, the software graphically shows you where to place the various components and provides a complete part number listing of everything you need. If you want to add components, just click on Add. The program automatically arranges all the rack components in their optimal configuration in the rack. To print out a report like the one I have, just click on Report. The report also gives us power and thermal information.
As you know, that kind of information is really important. Now, we talked to the building electrician and feel confident that the site is properly wired for the racks. He made sure that the power load is balanced and that the overall system doesn't exceed 80% of the branch circuit rating.
And if we plan to use power strips, we'd also make sure that the load did not exceed 80% of the power strip input rating, and that all connections were reliably grounded.
Okay, so besides the Rack Builder software, what else comes with the server?
Well, like all rack-mountable components, the server also comes with a hardware mounting kit, its own specific installation template, and a planning and installation guide.
Although you don't usually spend your time reading your planning and installation guides, you really should read this one.
Yes, or you'll probably really mess things up.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, the report here says that we'll be installing 2 rack-mountable ProLiant 2000 servers, a rack-mountable ProLiant storage system, a keyboard, monitor, a switch box, and since they'll want a tape backup, we'll also add the rack-mountable SCSI storage expander. Okay, so what about the UPS? Where will that go?
Well, this UPS will be installed in a 22U at our remote location. But if we were to install it now, it would be the first to go on the rack because it's so darn heavy. We'll show you that later on.
So the first unit we'll install in the 42U will be the rack-mountable ProLiant 2000 server.
Now, I configured all the components earlier in the week, so let's take a look inside.
Okay.
Notice the hood label. It clearly illustrates many of the upgrade and replacement procedures. One thing you should know about is this pin on the cover.
It's a safety interlock. When the cover is removed, the pin is pulled out of the power switch assembly and the power to the unit stops. It's a safety feature to prevent accidental contact with live voltage.
Now let's remove this quick disconnect Y brace with the thumb screws. The brace adds a lot of stability to the server drawer.
Look at how the processor cards are held in place by this processor bracket.
And you can take it out by loosening one thumb screw. Processors can be upgraded simply by inserting CPU cards in these slots.
Did you do a memory upgrade?
Yep, I upgraded the AECC memory to 64 megabytes. I could have upgraded to 256 megabytes on the system board. And if needed, I could have added a memory expansion board to bring the total to 512 megabytes. I also installed a management modem and configured it as COM1.
And look at how the system board is mounted, so it can slide backwards to provide access to the removable media cables. If you want, you can disconnect all the cables, slide the system board completely out of the way, and gain access to the power supply.
Compaq also provides the option of a redundant power supply. It's the same physical size, and it has duplicate circuitry to eliminate the power supply as single point of failure. So that's all the stuff inside.
Okay, now I noticed there are hot pluggable drives on the server. But tell me, why does it have a CD-ROM drive?
The CD-ROM allows for easier configuration. Now, I've already loaded each server with ESA configuration, the operating systems, and Compaq Insight Manager using SmartStart, which comes standard in the box packaging of each server.
Very impressive.
And when the server arrived, I faxed in this order form for my activation keys. It was easy to configure. Once I answered all the questions, I walked away. And I came back 45 minutes later, and the server was up and running.
It's a good thing you did that before we got here. Now we can just concentrate on the assembly. So, are we ready to move this rack into its final position?
Yes, we are. And this seems like a good time to talk about rack placement considerations. You need to make sure that there's adequate rear cabinet clearance so that air can flow freely through the system from front to back.
Clearance is also important so that we can gain access to the system.
Pretty easy.
Yes, it is. You'll need 30 inches in the back and 25 inches in the front. In single rack installations, the rack shouldn't be placed right next to the wall. Allow at least 6 inches of clearance.
So, let's move it into place. There. Simple.
Once the rack is in its final location, lower the leveling feet to prevent the rack from rolling around as you go through the installation process.
Next, we'll be removing the front and rear doors. But before we do that, let's go over a few of the door features. Both the front and rear doors come standard with locks, and both contain ventilation slots.
These slots allow the fans to pull cool air into the enclosure and send it out through the rear of the rack. As you know, providing proper ventilation for these components is very important. In fact, if a rack-mountable ProLiant server were installed in a third-party rack, ventilation would be the most critical factor.
That's right. Most third-party racks get their airflow from the floor, but Compaq gets its airflow from the front. So you must remove the front and rear doors when using a third-party rack.
You also have to make sure that the rack is a standard 19-inch rack that can support a 24-inch assembly and give an extra 6 inches for cable management.
That's a good point, John.
Now, are we ready to take off the doors?
We sure are.
Okay, first, open the door.
Okay.
Then depress the top hinge release and pull the top door pin loose. Then depress the bottom hinge release and pull the door completely loose from the rack. Do the same thing for the rear door.
Because this unit will be standing alone, we will be using 3 pair of stabilizing feet. Now remember, stabilizing feet are an optional item with the 42U.
But if we were coupling 2 or more racks together, stabilizing feet wouldn't be required.
If we were going to couple 2 racks together, we'd order the optional coupling kit. The kit contains dust strips, cosmetic face plates for the gaps, and all the hardware you need.
To couple 2 racks, attach angle brackets to the top, bottom, front, and back frame of the first rack with 4 Phillips screws. At this point, you shouldn't tighten the screws completely because you may have to adjust the position later.
It's easier to install the top and bottom dust strips before the racks are joined. First, press a strip of stick-on foam insulation into each side of the 2 dust strips.
Now, position the dust strip at the top of the rack and attach the dust strip to the coupling brackets with 2 screws. Do the same thing for the bottom dust strip.
Now move the second rack into place. Make any necessary adjustments to the alignment of the racks and brackets, and tighten the screws.
Once the units are attached, you can move the 3 bottom panels to allow space for the cables to exit the rack if the rear door is closed.
To do that, simply loosen the bottom panel locking screws in the rear and center panels. Slide the rear panel under the center panel until you have the opening you need. You can even remove one of the panels. This procedure can be used on any rack, whether coupled or standalone.
The last step in coupling racks together is to attach the front and rear face plates to hide the gap between the 2 racks.
First, align the face plate with the front of the racks. Then, attach it with 4 screws and washers.
You can attach as many racks as needed using the same procedure.
However, we will not be coupling this rack to another one, so we'll be adding stabilizing feet. They're installed only on the front and sides of the 42U. You don't have to put them on the back of the rack. As John finishes installing the stabilizing feet, I'll begin installing the mounting brackets and the slide rail assemblies for the ProLiant server. As you recall, the mounting brackets come standard in the rack's packing materials, and the slide rail assemblies are shipped with each Compaq rack mountable component. This 24-inch size is shipped with the ProLiant servers, and a 22-inch size is shipped with other rack mountable components. Now, the slide rail assembly is a 2-piece unit, which includes the bracket rail and the component rail. Now, it's best to attach the bracket rail to the mounting bracket before attaching the mounting bracket to the racks. Now, this is done in several steps. To begin, let's put the slide rails on a flat surface. By holding down the spring on the component rail, we can slip it out. Now we'll attach the bracket rail to the mounting bracket by aligning the front screw hole. Slide the rail forward and fasten with the screw. Align the rear screw holes and fasten with 2 screws. Because I'm installing the ProLiant server, I use the screw holes marked for the 24-inch slide rails. Now move the inner slide to gain access to the first of the other 2 screw holes. Move it further to gain access to the other one. Make sure you've installed a total of 5 screws.
Once Fred has joined the rails and mounting brackets, we'll attach them to the rack. Now, our report tells us that we will be installing this ProLiant server in the bottom of the rack. To help us with assembly, we'll be using this template for the server, which is found in the ProLiant shipping box. Note that the template is marked for front and rear placement. Use the front side to mark the location of the front of the component. Place the template on the rack, then mark the screw holes for the mounting brackets. We'll do this on the front and back of the rack. I'll also mark the positions of the cage nuts that will hold the thumb screws through the component faceplate. Once those are marked, use the fitting tool to insert the cage nuts. Next, we'll be installing the mounting bracket units on the front of the rack. Ready to work here. Okay, here, line me up here. Okay. The tabs on the front of the mounting bracket help align it with the rack frame. Now, carefully align the mounting bracket with the rear of the frame and secure it to the back corner brace with 2 screws.
While John finishes up with the other side, I'll go ahead and install the component rails to the sides of the server. To attach the component rails to the server, first place the tab on the component rail on the front of the chassis. Now attach the rails with 5 screws. The holes in the rail will line up only one way. Attach the other rail the same way.
Once we attach both rails, we can attach the cable management arm bracket. Attach it to the server with 4 screws.
Now that the bracket's in place, we can install the server into the rack. Want to give me a hand? All right. By carefully aligning the server's component rail with the rack's bracket rail, we can slide the server right into the rack.
Now attach one end of the cable management arm to the bracket with 2 screws.
Attach the other end of the arm to the rack with 2 washer face screws. Before loading another component, secure the server to the rack with the faceplate thumb screws.
We'll use the same procedure to add the other servers, the storage system, and the SCSI storage expander.
You get that side
Yeah, let me give you a hand with this.
Okay. I'll go get the keyboard tray template.
The next component we'll install is the keyboard tray.
2 trays come with the installation kit. One for the keyboard trackball and one for the monitor, along with all the necessary hardware. I'll use the same procedures we used to install the other side-mounted component. Nice work.
Thanks.
Now that John has installed the keyboard tray, we need to install a 4-port switch box. Now, if you're going to be installing more than 4 servers, then you might want to use an 8-port switch box.
Mark the location of the switch box with the template, just as we did for the server. Next, install the cage nuts, then secure the switch box to the rack with 4 screws. If you want to install the optional switch box connector kit, remove the pre-installed brackets from the switch box and replace them with the optional bracket. The remaining installation procedure is the same.
Now we can begin cabling. First, plug the power cable into the server. Then, attach the power cable retaining clip to the server chassis with a screw.
Now fasten the power cable to the power cable retaining clip with a cable tie.
Fold the power cable into a service loop of about 8 inches in diameter. This will give some play in the cord when you slide the system board. After you've plugged in all the cables, tie them to the cable management arm with releasable cable ties.
Push the cables down the cable channel of the rack on the same side as the cable management arm. Now cable the switch box by connecting the keyboard, monitor, and mouse. Then connect the CPU to switch cables from each server to the switch box. And connect the AC power cord and plug it into a grounded AC outlet. Now that we've finished the cabling, we're going to install the optional side panels on the 42U. Fred, give me a hand.
That's what I'm here for. Okay, easy does it.
Lift the side panel into place and fasten with screws. 2 in the front and 2 in the back. And since we have just one rack, I'll put the panels on both sides. But if you have more than one rack coupled together, you'll want to put them at the end of the suite of racks. Now that we've installed all the components, you can still see there's some empty space in the rack. We'll cover that with blanking panels. Blanking panels come in 1U, 2U, 4U, and 8U sizes, and they help with airflow through the rack enclosure. They're installed with screws and rubber washers.
All right. Take a look here. Oh, looks good. Well, now we're ready to put the front and rear doors back on the rack. Want to give me a hand, John?
Sure.
All right, get that. Thank you. Thank you. Simply insert the door pins back into the hinges until they click into place.
Okay.
All right.
So, we almost finished here?
Yes, except for powering up and checking my configuration. But there's one more thing that we need to show you before we go, and that's the UPS installation procedure for the 22U at our remote location.
All right, let's go.
After we've installed the UPS unit, we can begin working on the server.
That's right. Now, because the UPS weighs about 145 pounds, it's always installed on fixed rails at the bottom of the rack. Never try to install it on slide rails.
And for safety's sake, never load more than 2 UPS units per rack.
The mounting hardware and template are included with the rack-mountable UPS. The first step is to mark the location of the cage nuts and the mounting screws on the front and back using the template.
Next, use the fitting tool to insert cage nuts on the inside of the rack.
Loosen the adjustment screws in the middle of the fixed rail. and adjust the rail to fit from the front to the rear of the rack.
Now align the fixed rail's rear flange with the corresponding cage nuts in the rear rack frame. Insert 3 screws into the cage nuts and tighten.
Next, align the front flange of the rail inside the front rack frame, making sure the raised alignment discs in the flange fit into the rack perforations.
Attach the front flange with 1 truss head screw in the top hole. Now tighten the adjustment screws in the middle of the fixed rail.
When all the rails have been installed, load the UPS in the rack, using at least 2 people to assist you.
Once the UPS is loaded, fasten the faceplate of the UPS to the rack.
Now attach the left tie-down bracket to the rail with 1 screw. Also attach it to the UPS using 1 screw.
The right tie-down bracket uses 1 screw from the UPS chassis and 1 screw supplied with the brackets. So, you remove the existing chassis screw and use it to fasten the bracket to the chassis. Use the supplied screw to fasten the bracket to the rail.
On the back of the UPS, you'll find several receptacles. This connector is for the emergency power-off switch. And this 9-pin serial connector is used to monitor the UPS with Compaq Insight Manager. The domestic 120-volt UPS comes with an L530P twist lock. The room has to be wired with the appropriate receptacle called an L530R.
When the UPS is being used at an international location, use the country kit, which will contain the country-specific power cord. As you can see, there is quite a difference between the international and domestic UPS. That's it.
Oh, that was easy. Well, we hope this has helped you with your assembly of the rack-mountable ProLiant system.
Good luck, and we'll see you next time.